Whenever I think about ritual, I think of Rabbi Jerome Molino of Danbury, Connecticut. I met Rabbi Molino in 1983, but his connection to our Unitarian Universalist movement goes back much, much further to 1935, when he was called as the first rabbi at the Reformed Synagogue in Danbury. The minister at Danbury's first Universalist church at the time, the Reverend Harry Adams Hersey, was the only cleric in town to reach out to the young rabbi and offer his friendship and his professional collegiality. He actually walked across the street and reached out his hand and immediately said, "We must exchange pulpits." Now Jerome retired. He led his whole career in Danbury, and he ultimately retired and became Rabbi Emeritus in 1981, but he remained active in interfaith efforts in northern Fairfield County until he died in 2002. He remained also a friend to every UU minister who was lucky enough to serve with him in the same town as I was in the mid-1980s. You Universalist Unitarians, as he always called us, because it was a Universalist church, so when they merged, he just always said, "You Universalist Unitarians are a lot like us Reformed Jews," he once said to me. "Same theology, same polity. You just don't have any rituals." There's a lot of truth to that. But in fact, ritual is any activity that a society establishes to celebrate and renew commonly held perceptions. As the Congregational minister Charles Hambrick Stowe has written, even seemingly anti-ritualists cannot live without ritual, and iconoclasts cannot live without images that give meaning to their lives. This is true for everyone, Universalist Unitarians included. And indeed, our regular Sunday services have their ritual dimensions: hymns, lighting the chalice, joys and sorrows, music. And you can mix it up, but you need to include some continuity so that it's not totally free-form, people have a sense of what's going on, and some originality so it's not too rigid, stiff, and lifeless. Some left lobe stimulation, the sermon, the readings, the linear sequential material, and some right lobed, the music, the candles, periods of silence, the image on the front. Part of the reason I like to have an image is because it opens up in different ways than just a lecture. Try to drop one of these elements, and you really run into problems. When I was the interim in Redwood City, I didn't try, but I met extraordinary resistance just trying to, they had a habit of having the announcements at the very end of the service. And I thought, you get this whole mood up, and then somebody stands up and says, and this committee will meet here, and that committee, and please sign the sign-up sheet. And I went, wait a minute, can't we do that at the beginning? And as I've noted, it's the only part of UU life that the minister has dictatorial control is over the order of service. So, but if you try to change it, you'll run into serious resistance. This is the thing. And in fact, there was an uproar, and they were heavily into this internet thing, and how dare and coincidentally, my gallbladder acted up, and I had to go, and I had to remove. The first day in 55 years, I spent the night in the hospital, and it worked to my advantage because everybody went, oh, we've been too hard on the man. But the point is, it's very hard to change any of these. And it's not just the ritual of the little formal dimensions of the worship, but the coffee hour, the social hour, these are part of the thing too, and try to eliminate them, you're bound to hear about it. Plus, almost all UU groups have some intentionally designed and collectively enacted rituals that are part of what you call the liturgical year. Here at UUCIL, and every week that are de rigueur, or just about, the words used to both light and extinguish the flaming chalice, which were first penned by your first minister, Elizabeth Sully Jones. And then, I don't know how long it's been going on, but the hymn 1010, we give thanks at the end. These are, as they're important. They're rituals. Don't change them for. That's the message I get. And okay, most of our congregations do that, and all of them have variations of other certain services. The flower communion, a water communion. Many have an annual bread or apple or other kind of communion service. A Christmas pageant. In June, a teacher appreciation and bridging ceremony. And there are other ceremonies too. But these things that you try to eliminate, and you'll hear about it. As today's order of service makes clear, I have tried to add a little shape to your services here by suggesting what the form, what the arc of the service is that I'm aiming at. And so notice the 6 stages that I've outlined in today's order of service to help make clear what I'm trying to achieve each Sunday. Gathering, centering, affirming community, introspection, exploration, and returning to the service of life. One of the reasons I like having announcements, if there are going to be any at all, at the beginning of the services is to support and not work against the flow I'm trying to help people experience. And ultimately Redwood City agreed with me, but it took them a while. We talk about the flower communion, the water communion. This despite the fact that communion is emotionally packed for many Unitarians, as it was for Ralph Waldo Emerson, because of its connection to the Eucharist in Christianity. And Emerson, was a Unitarian minister. He graduated of Harvard Divinity School. He was minister at Second Church, Boston, for 3 years. Like Murray, it was a tough 3 years. His wife died. He was very stricken, but the communion service meant nothing to him. And he asked the trustees if he could get out of doing it. He said, it means nothing to me. I know some other members, it's not a big deal. I can get the associate to do it when we have to do it. But at least for now, I don't want to do it. And they said, well, no, that's not okay. And so that's why Emerson quit being a minister. There's more to it, but that was the presenting symptom, I guess you could say. Now, the first water communion, so that the Lord's Supper, the whole communion, I mentioned that's why Emerson quit. That's also why Norbert Čapek, from the Prague during martyred by the Nazis in 1944, but during that period between the First and Second World War, he created this megachurch in Prague, Unitarian, and he introduced the first flower communion, which you have every spring, like most of our churches do. And he created it to try to find new rituals unencumbered by emotional baggage carried from traditions that our members have left behind in their personal lives. And the flower communion was such. Now, the first water communion ritual, we did that on, September 9th, I think, or 4th, the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. The first water communion was held at the November 1980 Women and Religion Continental Convocation of UUs in Michigan. And it was created by the hymnist Carolyn McDade, who wrote Spirit of Life and several others in our hymnal, and Lucille Longview, who was a celebrated lay leader. And as Lucille wrote, we created it as a way for women who lived far apart to connect the work each was doing locally to the whole. To so-and-so is doing in this congregation, in this nonprofit group, in this women's collective, with the whole that they were trying to do, and in the UU church. The water communion has come to be used as an ingathering homecoming ritual for the majority of our UU congregations, as it is here. But communion is not only a proper noun, it is also a common noun, meaning intimacy and connection. Eating and drinking as are parts of a universal experience. To exalt this common experience into a unifying ritual can be restorative and healing, especially during a transitional period like the one your congregation is in the midst of, and especially when some UUCIL members may have felt bruised or wounded by Lucas's decision to, take another job and move back to the Midwest, or by congregational events since his departure, like the guest sermon on July 2nd, or the words of others during a bumpy transitional period. And especially such rituals are valuable, such times, especially at such times, sharing a ritual meal or bouquet or water ceremony can bring a community together, pointing the way toward renewal and reconciliation. And I say this from some experience. I was surprised over the years at how these crafting rituals where we all sit together, where we sit in a circle like we did at the water communion, do more. You can talk to people about, well, we've got to get over these tough times and start treating one another better. But if you just sit in a circle for about a month, that'll happen. I mean, it's not quite that simple, but it's amazing how helpful that can be. Feelings of dislocation are not confined, by the way, to faith communities in the midst of transition. We are in the midst of tough times all over the United States, at least for many. I've only been here a couple of months, but it's clear we have all felt pain and anxiety as various members have lit candles for themselves or for family members who are struggling. Likewise, many have lamented the agony we read about every day across the globe, these severe weather events, the threat of war. And virtually every Unitarian I know is all but beside themselves over last November's presidential election results. Communion, as a common noun, intimacy and connection, is more a state of mind or state of heart than a rite, something we share when recognizing that there's violence everywhere, all around us, including even in our own hearts. People agree to try to be a loving community anyway. Communion happens whenever we agree individually to leave shame and blame aside or behind, at least keep it at bay, that we might soar collectively. Covenants, like the hymns that you sing or the affirmations you repeat nearly every Sunday, can help in that process. Good worship, including familiar rituals, can also help. This makes me think again of Rabbi Jerome Molino. We Jews have never abandoned ritual, he told me, because it helps us remember the meaning of the 46th Psalm. That line, which Stephen Mitchell also said was his favorite in the whole Bible, and Rabbi Molino said it says it all in this one line: be still and know that I am God. In other words, rituals help us meditate, help us turn off our never-ending thoughts and inner chatter that we might instead experience our inner life. Be still and know that I am God, Rabbi Molino went on, was one of his two favorite verses in the Torah. And I still recall a meditation he led on that verse at our church. And I'll share it with you now. So it's very simple. Just sit, get deep breath. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Rituals help us by effectively preoccupying and thereby magically quieting our scheming, critical consciousness in such a way that the intuitive and imaginative parts of our mind can bubble up and come into play, infuse our thinking with new brightness. Unlike Rabbi Molino and most religious professionals, I did not come to this realization through any liturgical tradition, but through theater. I always liked theater. My family had season tickets to the Cleveland Playhouse, and I also acted in several plays as a kid. Then, during and immediately after my seminary years, I was part of an experimental theater company in Palo Alto and later in Berkeley. And we put up 29 shows in 10 years. In the summer of 1977, our theater company was putting up Euripides' Bacchae. And I remember reading Jane Ellen Harrison's Prolegomena to the study of Greek religion. Jane Ellen Harrison was a great Oxford classicist at the turn of the 20th century, and she applied then contemporary archaeological discoveries to an interpretation of Greek religion in ways that have now become standard. She described Greek tragedy as the universalization of what had been in earlier times cultic ritual. So Bacchae, you see the Greek chorus, all these Greek tragedies, the chorus is basically singing the incantations of the Bacchantes, of the followers of Dionysus. There they go. And in other words, Aeschylus, Euripides, and Sophocles essentially took the ancient rites of their forebears and put them on the stage. Moreover, she explained, the archaeological evidence was clear. The proscenium arch, so imagine this, a proscenium arch, like a play, and here's my Greek chorus, and here I'm the, Pentheus, maybe, in that play, with my thyrsus and screaming aloud. But if you go back under the proscenium arch, and she did that, you find there's a circle, and it's around a fire pit. Add to this our knowledge that the word religion comes from the Latin religio, meaning relink, as in circling around a campfire, And I suddenly understood Greek drama as a means in ancient times, and still today, of bringing the ancient stories, the Greek myths and metaphors to life, cracking open the metaphors and experiencing. That's the magic of theater. Once you memorize your lines and your blocking, you can enter an extraordinary realm of freedom. And it's kind of hard to explain, but that's somehow at the heart of things. What is it? Collective imagination. When we did that play, we did it every night. We rehearsed it for weeks. At one point, I remember, we all did. I mean, we were singing this stuff, and I don't know how to say it other than that Dionysus appeared. And, you know, afterwards we went, did you see that? And maybe it was collective imagination. I mean, I don't know what it was, but I'm saying that these rituals work. They're a means of calming participants' hyperactive monkey minds that we might experience these metaphors coming to life. In UU congregations, the metaphor we most often celebrate is the web of life. Recognizing its horror, we're all connected and there's terrible things going on we feel bad about, but also its power to heal and to restore us. All life, wrote the mythologist Joseph Campbell, is monstrous as it forever feeds on itself. And it's true, all life feeds off life. The philosophers call it the great chain of being. As life comes to fruition, that is its fulfillment as fruit, it is sacrificed to feed and sustain the up-and-coming generation of life right behind it. Poet and farmer Wendell Berry laments that our culture has forgotten this principle on which it's actually based, the law of usufruct, or the use of the fruit. People can forget this, but it's still always true. We are tied to the earth and to one another, often violently. To live, writes Wendell Berry, we must daily break the body and shed the blood of creation. When we do this knowingly, lovingly, skillfully, and reverently, it is a sacrament. When we do it ignorantly, greedily, clumsily, destructively, it is a desecration. In such desecration, we condemn ourselves to spiritual and moral loneliness and to others to want. Services like the water communion that Bob Meese and I put together 4 weeks ago help us bond and reconcile with each other, help us remember that we're part of something bigger, the interdependent web, and more sublime than our individual egos, and help us from scapegoating one another. The flower communion has the same effect. Indeed, all worship, well-conceived and well-ordered, works the same way, to turn off our constantly chattering monkey minds and to connect us to patterns more basic, inner rhythms that restore and renew. In conclusion, the adjustments I've made to the order of service, I assure you, are well considered. I'm also dialectical. If you don't like something, don't be reluctant to tell me. Doesn't mean I'll change my mind again, but I'm open to it. I'm always open to it. And I usually say to congregations, well, let's try it for 6 months and see, okay? And then we'll vote on it. And half the time when you do that, then at the end of 6 months, people go, what? Why would you change it? We've always done it this way. Anyway, I will continue to tweak things as we go along. Allow yourselves to see how it feels. Give it a try. Nothing's etched in stone. We're fluid here, or let us hope so. And let us dare to make it so. In that spirit, may we go forward together in the spirit of love and discovery and uplift. May it be so. Amen and namaste.